Hey everyone, welcome back. We're tackling a listener request today. How to explain anything clearly and effectively.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is right. It's like the holy grail of communication, isn't it? You know, they want to cut through the noise, no fluff, just getting right to the point.
Yeah, like pure communication gold.
Exactly. And we've got this WikiHow article to guide us.
Oh, cool.
It's called How to Explain Things Better, 12 Communication Techniques. So we're going to dive deep into that.
Okay, great.
So it jumps right into this idea of starting strong, which I think is super important. And they talk about how crucial it is to lead with the most relevant information first,
Okay.
to kind of immediately hook your audience.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Because you've got to understand what your audience really cares about and address that right away.
Uh-huh.
Like, don't bury the lead, put it front and center.
Yeah, totally. They actually use this great example of giving a presentation on a new financial plan. So instead of starting with all the background details and kind of like easing into it, you'd lead with something really attention-grabbing, like profits are declining.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, and suddenly everyone's ears perk up because you've established the stakes right from the get-go.
Yeah, like you've created that instant intrigue, like the opening scene of a movie that pulls you in.
Totally. So I know you love clear, concise communication.
Yes, I appreciate that.
So this next tip is right up your alley.
Okay.
It's all about simplicity.
Oh.
The article really hammers home the importance of simplifying even the most complex ideas
Yeah.
into just like 2 or 3 key points,
Okay.
and avoiding jargon at all costs,
Right.
because it's acknowledging that not everyone has the same level of background knowledge as you might have.
Yeah, that's true. You can't assume that everybody knows everything,
Exactly. So you need to start with a simple framework,
Right.
make sure everyone's on the same page,
Yeah.
and then you can add complexity as you go. It's kind of like building a house.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't start with like the intricate details of the electrical wiring
Right.
before you've laid a solid foundation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they actually suggest testing your explanation
Oh, interesting.
on someone who's totally unfamiliar with the topic
Right.
to see if they can grasp that core concept, if they can, you've achieved clarity.
Yeah, that's a good test. It can be humbling sometimes,
For sure.
but it's so valuable to kind of step outside your own expert bubble.
Yeah.
See it from a fresh perspective.
Okay, this next tip kind of threw me for a loop at first.
Oh,
The article actually suggests prioritizing clarity
okay.
over perfect accuracy.
Oh, interesting.
Like sometimes a simplified analogy, even if it's not 100% accurate, can be more effective in getting that core concept across.
So, I mean, it's more important to be understood than to be technically perfect.
Yeah, basically, it's like that saying, all models are wrong, but some are useful.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So they give this example of explaining Wi-Fi to your grandmother. You're probably not going to get into the technical nitty-gritty of radio waves.
Right.
You're going to use a simple analogy, like it lets you use the internet without wires.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's about creating that moment of understanding, even if the explanation's not completely comprehensive.
Yeah, and the details can come later, once that initial foundation of understanding is built.
Okay, I like that.
All right, let's talk about making information stick.
Okay, good.
The article is a huge fan of word pictures.
Word pictures.
Yeah, like similes, metaphors, and analogies.
Okay, yeah.
They argue that this is how you make information relatable and memorable.
Yeah, because our brains are wired to make connections, right? So
Yeah.
when we encounter something new, we try to relate it to something we already know. And I think word pictures kind of provide those bridges of understanding.
Totally. Like that classic analogy of blood vessels are like highways for blood cells. It's so much more vivid
Right.
and engaging than a boring technical description.
It's true. It makes you wonder why textbooks don't use more analogies.
I know.
It's like they're deliberately trying to make things boring.
Maybe.
But I think it's a fun challenge for everyone listening to try to come up with their own analogies.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
For concepts they're trying to explain, it's a good way to exercise those creative muscles and become better communicators.
Totally. And you know what else helps make information stick?
What's that?
Memory hacks.
Oh, yeah.
The article loves mnemonics, acronyms, rhymes, even storytelling as tools for boosting retention.
Mnemonics are like cheat codes for your brain.
They are.
They turn information into something fun and digestible. It makes it so much easier to remember.
Like Roy G. Biv
Classic.
for remembering the colors of the rainbow. Or how about every good boy deserves fudge for the lines on a musical staff?
Oh, yeah.
These little memory tricks can make such a difference.
They really can. It's about finding those creative ways to tap into how our brains naturally work.
Exactly.
And let's be honest, we've all had that frustrating tip of the tongue experience, where you know something,
Oh, yeah.
but you just can't recall it. Mnemonics can be a lifesaver in those moments.
Totally agree. Okay, so let's keep this momentum going with another tip from the article. Break it down.
Okay.
They're big advocates for breaking down those complex explanations into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Yeah.
Whether that's like steps in a process or lists, even role-playing scenarios.
It's about cognitive load, right?
Yeah.
Like our brains can only process so much information at once.
Exactly.
So breaking things down into bite-sized pieces makes it so much easier to digest.
Totally. They use this example of explaining how to start a business.
Okay.
You wouldn't just overwhelm someone with a massive info dump.
Right.
You break it down into logical steps. Conducting market research, developing a business plan, securing funding.
Yeah, it's like learning a new recipe or mastering a new skill.
Uh-huh.
Breaking it down makes it way less intimidating and more achievable.
And they even suggest incorporating role-playing. Like if you're trying to explain to a friend how to handle a tricky situation,
Oh, yeah.
you could actually act it out with them.
That's cool. So it's like learning by doing,
Exactly.
but with an element of playfulness.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's talk about a tip that seems kind of obvious,
Okay.
but it's often overlooked. It's rephrase and repeat.
Rephrase and repeat.
Yeah, the article really stresses the power of rewording your explanation multiple times
Got it.
just to drive a point home.
Repetition is key for learning, right?
It is, but the key is to avoid just repeating the exact same words over and over again.
Yeah, that would be boring.
Right. You got to find different ways to express the same concept,
Okay.
using different examples or approaching it from a different angle.
Makes sense.
So it's like looking at a sculpture from different perspectives.
Oh, I like that.
Each vantage point reveals something new.
Yeah.
So they give the example of explaining how to tie a shoe. You might start by demonstrating it,
Uh-huh.
then give verbal instructions.
Right.
And finally have the person try it themselves.
Okay.
Each repetition, each different mode of explanation reinforces that learning process.
Yeah, this principle applies even when we're communicating with ourselves, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like repeating a phone number out loud to remember it.
Totally. All the time. Okay, let's move on to a tip that's especially for our visual learners.
Okay.
Using visual aids. So the article's a big advocate for incorporating charts, graphs, pictures whenever possible.
It makes sense. Visual aids are powerful for communication.
They are. They make information more accessible, engaging, and memorable.
Right.
And let's be honest, a well-designed graph or chart could be way more compelling than a wall of text.
For sure. It's like the difference between reading a recipe and watching a cooking show.
Exactly. So the article suggests using graphs to highlight trends,
Okay.
charts to map out sequences of events, maps to provide spatial context.
That makes sense.
They even mention, like, when you're presenting to a large audience,
Yeah.
it's important to provide a little bit of background information for the visual aid
Okay.
and to maintain eye contact while you're talking about it.
Right.
So it's all about making sure that visual aid enhances your explanation
Right.
rather than distracting from it.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a tip that I think is often overlooked, but it's so crucial.
Okay.
Let your passion for the topic shine through.
Oh, yeah.
The article talks about how important it is to speak with energy
Okay.
and genuine interest in what you're explaining.
Enthusiasm is contagious.
It is.
When someone's genuinely excited about a topic, it makes you want to learn more.
Yeah.
Even if it's something you wouldn't normally be interested in.
Yeah,
It's like the difference between reading a textbook and listening to a storyteller.
it really is.
One is dry and factual.
Uh-huh.
The other pulls you in and makes you feel connected. Yeah.
And, you don't have to be a naturally charismatic speaker to be enthusiastic. It's really about tapping into that genuine interest you have,
Yeah,
letting it shine through in your voice and your body language.
I agree with that.
And they even suggest, like when you're talking to a group,
Yeah.
to pretend you're talking to your best friend.
Okay.
Let those hand gestures flow. Don't be afraid to vary the tone and speed of your voice.
It's about making it a conversation, not a lecture.
Exactly. And speaking of conversation, the next tip emphasizes checking for understanding, which I think is super crucial when you're dealing with those complex topics.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to get caught up in our own flow of explaining that we forget to check in with our audience.
Yeah.
Make sure they're actually following along.
Right.
But effective communication is a two-way street.
It is.
So they suggest asking simple questions like, does this make sense so far? Or is there anything you'd like me to clarify?
It's such a simple thing, but it makes a big difference, right?
It does.
It shows that you're invested in their understanding. You're open to feedback.
Yeah, and sometimes the most valuable insights come from those moments when someone asks a question that reveals a gap in their understanding.
Right.
It gives you a chance to clarify
Yeah.
and make sure everyone is truly on the same page.
Absolutely.
And they also stress that it's okay to start with the basics,
Yeah.
Even if you think your audience might already know the information, it's better to err on the side of clarity and make sure everyone has that foundation.
For sure. It's like building a house again. You need that solid foundation.
Exactly. Okay, speaking of understanding, the next tip is all about reading those nonverbal cues, like paying attention to the listener's body language.
Oh, yeah. Body language is fascinating.
It is.
It often reveals what people are thinking and feeling, even when they're not saying it out loud. It's like a secret language.
It is a secret language.
We all sing it,
Right.
even if we're not always aware of it.
So things like furrowed brows, avoiding eye contact, maybe even crossed arms,
Yeah, classic signs that someone's lost or disengaged.
right? It's like a warning sign that you might need to adjust your approach.
Yeah, maybe simplify things a bit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or provide a different example. But on the flip side,
Uh-huh.
if someone is leaning in, making eye contact, nodding along, those are all good signs, right?
Yeah, those are positive signs that they're engaged and following along.
Yeah.
It's like getting a little boost of encouragement,
It is.
knowing your message is hitting the mark.
Yeah, and it's like a feedback loop, right?
Totally.
Their body language gives you valuable information
Yeah,
that you can use to fine-tune your communication in real time.
absolutely.
Okay, so let's wrap up part 1 of our deep dive with a tip that really resonates with me.
Okay.
It's about motivating your audience to take action.
Ooh, I like that.
This last tip is all about bridging the gap between understanding and action.
Right, because information is most valuable when it's applied.
Exactly. So they talk about framing your explanation
Uh-huh.
in a way that highlights the relevance and importance of the topic.
Yeah.
So it's not just about knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's about empowering them to do something with that knowledge.
Hip sense.
Like imagine you were explaining to your sister why her smartphone has been running slowly.
Okay.
You wouldn't just stop at the diagnosis.
Right.
You'd tell her how emptying her phone's storage could speed things up,
Yeah.
and then you'd show her how to do it.
Right.
So you're equipping her with the knowledge and the tools
Yeah.
to take action.
That's a great example.
Or, if you were giving a presentation on climate change,
Okay.
you wouldn't just present the facts and figures.
Yeah.
You would end by providing resources and concrete steps that people can take to make a difference.
Right.
You'd empower them to become part of the solution.
I love that.
It's about moving beyond passive information consumption,
Yeah,
inspiring action, making knowledge meaningful and impactful.
absolutely. I agree.
So that wraps up part 1
Okay.
of our deep dive into explaining anything clearly and effectively. We'll be back with part 2 soon.
Can't wait. It's interesting how all these tips kind of build on each other.
Yeah.
We talked about starting strong, keeping it simple, that vivid language,
Yeah.
encouraging action. It's
Yeah.
like a recipe for good communication.
I love that analogy. It really does. Like we're putting together all the ingredients for a delicious and impactful message.
Exactly.
And speaking of recipes, this next tip from the article,
Okay.
it reminds me of something a seasoned chef might do.
Oh, yeah.
Taking the temperature of the dish, making sure it hasn't gotten,
Overcooked or something.
yeah, overcooked, making sure the flavors are balanced, the seasoning.
Right, right.
The article calls this checking for understanding.
Oh, that's important.
So crucial, especially when you're dealing with, complex information, nuanced information.
It's easy to get caught up in your own explanation.
Right.
And assume that everyone's following along, but, that's not always the case.
Yeah.
So checking in really ensures that everyone is, on the same page.
Totally. And the article suggests incorporating these simple questions
Okay.
throughout your explanation, like little check-ins.
Like what?
Does that make sense? Or is there anything you'd like me to clarify?
So simple, but it makes a big difference.
It really does. It shows that you value their input,
Right.
that you're genuinely invested in making sure they understand.
And sometimes the most valuable insights
Yes.
come from those questions.
Yes.
That reveal that there's like a gap in understanding.
Totally.
And then you have the chance to address it.
You can go back and clarify.
Right.
Make sure everyone's on the same page, deepen that learning experience.
It's like those moments in the classroom when a student asks a question.
Yeah.
And it just suddenly brings a whole new perspective on the topic.
It totally does.
Everyone's like, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Exactly. Okay, so this next tip from the article
Okay.
is all about tuning into those subtle signals
Okay.
and that tell us so much about how our message is being received.
Oh, interesting.
It's about paying attention to body language.
Oh, body language is fascinating because it reveals what people are thinking and feeling.
Yes.
Even if they don't actually say it out loud.
It's like its own language
It is. It's like a secret language that we all speak.
that we deal
Even
with.
if we're not aware of it.
So things like furrowed brows,
Right.
avoiding eye contact,
Yeah.
maybe even crossed arms.
Uh-huh.
Those are all classic signs that someone might be, confused, bored, disengaged.
Yeah, like a warning sign that maybe you need to adjust your approach.
Right.
Simplify things, use a different example.
Right. And then on the other hand,
Yeah.
if someone is leaning in, making eye contact, nodding along,
Oh, yeah, those are good.
those are all positive signs,
Right.
right? That they're
Yes.
engaged, that they're following along.
It's like a little boost of encouragement,
It is.
knowing your message is hitting the mark.
It is.
It's like a feedback loop, right?
It is.
Their body language gives you information that you can use to kind of fine-tune your communication on the fly.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I like that.
Okay, so let's dive into the last few tips from this article.
All right.
This next one really speaks to me
Okay.
because it emphasizes the power of storytelling.
Oh, I love a good story.
Me too. As a way to make information more engaging and memorable.
Storytelling is powerful because it just taps into our human desire
Uh-huh.
to connect with narratives.
Yes.
It's how we make sense of the world. It's how we learn and remember.
It's true.
Right.
They use the example of explaining a historical event
Okay.
instead of just listing the facts and dates.
Right, which can be boring.
Yeah, exactly. You weave them into a compelling story
Oh,
with characters and conflict and resolution.
I like it.
Suddenly the information comes alive.
Yeah.
It becomes relatable.
And it sticks.
It sticks in your mind.
Think about all those stories that you learned as a child.
Oh, for sure.
Whether they were fairy tales or myths or family anecdotes.
Yeah,
Those stories have probably stayed with you long after you've forgotten the specific details.
they really have. And the article also points out that stories can be a great way
Yeah.
to illustrate really complex concepts.
Interesting.
So instead of just explaining a theory,
Right.
you can tell a story that embodies that theory, make it more concrete and understandable.
It's like using a parable to teach a moral lesson.
Exactly.
The story becomes a vehicle for that deeper understanding.
It totally does. Okay, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this next tip.
Okay.
The article suggests that it can be helpful to get your audience involved.
Oh, yeah, I like
The
that.
learning process.
Yeah,
Turn it into more of an interactive experience.
I love that idea. It goes back to that creating a dialogue rather than a lecture thing.
Yeah,
Right. When you involve your audience, they become active participants
Totally.
in the learning process.
which makes it more engaging.
Yeah, it does.
And the information is more likely to stick.
They actually remember it.
They do, so they suggest incorporating activities,
Okay.
questions, even debates.
Like to get people thinking critically about the information.
Yeah,
And maybe even applying it to their own lives.
exactly. So it's like turning a presentation into a workshop
I love that.
where everyone has the chance to contribute and share their own perspective.
It makes it so much more engaging.
And it doesn't even have to be anything super elaborate.
Right.
It could be as simple as just asking your audience to, brainstorm examples,
Yeah.
share their own experiences,
Okay.
or even just summarize the key takeaways in their own words.
Yeah, I like that.
The key is just to create opportunities
Right.
for interaction and engagement,
I agree.
which ultimately leads to a deeper understanding.
For sure.
Okay, so let's wrap up our exploration of this WikiHow article with a tip
All right.
that emphasizes the importance of being patient and understanding
Oh, that's a good one.
with our audience. And they literally call it that, being patient and empathetic.
Sure.
Because it ties back to recognizing
Yeah.
that everyone comes to the table with a different level of understanding,
Right.
different learning style.
Of course.
So, not everyone is going to grasp a concept immediately.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it's normal.
It's about being patient and providing that support, offering different explanations and examples
Yeah.
until that light bulb moment happens.
It's about meeting people where they are
Yes.
rather than expecting them to instantly jump to your level of understanding.
And creating a safe and supportive learning environment. Have
Exactly.
people feel comfortable asking questions.
Yes.
Seeking clarification.
Because ultimately, communication is about building those bridges of understanding,
Yes.
not walls of frustration.
It is.
And sometimes those bridges take, a little extra time and effort
They
to
do.
construct.
But it's worth it.
It is.
Wow, we've really covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From starting strong to using that vivid language.
Yeah.
Incorporating visuals and even inspiring action.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing how many different facets there are to, explaining something effectively.
It's like we've assembled a toolkit for clear communications,
Ooh, I like that.
filled with all sorts of useful instruments and techniques.
It really is. And, it's striking me is how interconnected all these tips are.
Yeah.
It's not just about mastering one or two of them in isolation.
Right.
It's about understanding how they all work together
Yeah.
to create a really impactful and memorable explanation.
It's like a symphony where
Mhm.
each instrument plays its part,
Uh-huh.
but it's the harmony of all the parts that creates that beautiful music.
That's beautiful. I'm thinking back to that tip about using analogies and metaphors.
Yeah.
I've always been drawn to that approach.
Me too. It's very creative and engaging.
It is.
Right.
And it's fascinating how a well-chosen analogy
Yeah.
can just suddenly illuminate a concept
Totally.
and make it click for someone who was previously struggling.
It's like finding the perfect key to unlock a door
It is.
that had been previously, stubbornly shut.
Yeah. I wonder if our listener has any favorite analogies
Oh, yeah.
that they've come across or used in their own communication.
I'd love to hear.
Maybe they can share them with us on social media.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so we've explored all 12 tips.
We did it.
We did it from that WikiHow article.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Always more to learn.
Always more to learn, right?
Uh-huh.
So what are some of the key takeaways that you're hoping our listener will walk away with?
Well, for me, the biggest one is that explaining something, well, it's not about showing off how much you know.
Uh-huh.
It's about really understanding your audience.
Yeah.
And tailoring your approach to meet their needs.
Meeting them where they're at.
Exactly.
Their learning styles.
It's about building a bridge of understanding.
I love that.
Right? One clear and engaging explanation at a time.
It's about making communication a collaborative process.
Yeah.
Where everyone feels heard and understood and empowered to learn.
Exactly. And, another key takeaway is that this is a skill
It is.
that you can learn
Yes.
and you can practice. And the more you do it,
Uh-huh.
the better you'll become.
You will. It's like anything else you practice it, you get better at it.
Absolutely.
So the next time you find yourself needing to explain something,
Yeah.
whether it's, a simple concept or a complex theory, remember the tools and techniques that we explored today.
Yeah. Have fun with it.
Yes. Experiment. Find what works for you.
Exactly.
And most importantly, have fun.
Because communication at the end of the day, it's about connection.
It is.
It's about sharing ideas, sparking curiosity, inspiring action.
That's beautiful.
And who knows, maybe you'll even discover a hidden talent
Oh, yeah.
for explaining things in a way that just makes people light up.
And make them understand things in a way they hadn't before.
Totally.
That is a perfect note to end on.
It is.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
I've learned so much, and I hope our listeners have too.
Me too.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning,
Yeah.
and keep those conversations flowing.
Absolutely. I seek 88.